My fellow St. Lucians, I'm here tonight in a large part because of a deliberate and orchestrated effort to deny me from speaking during the debates on the estimates of expenditure and the appropriation bill in the House of Assembly. I want to make it clear from the outset that no agreement was reached as to the speaking order for the debate. Records of Hansard show that leaders of the opposition have spoken at different times over the years. As recent as last year's debate, the leader of the opposition spoke last. Furthermore, according to the standing orders for the debate to be closed prematurely, the speaker would need to ensure that no rules were being abused and that the minority's rights were not being infringed. There was no question that there were still members, including myself, who indicated they wished to speak. Despite efforts by the unholy alliance of the supermajority to bully the opposition, I remain faithful that the Almighty God guides me and is with me always as I represent the people of Micoud South and the thousands of St. Lucians who deserve to be heard. I respect our House of Parliament and remain committed to ensuring that it does not descend into irrelevance and is above a reproach, but just as importantly, it's not brought into disrepute. The exercise of our rights as parliamentarians to speak freely is fundamental to this institution. Indeed, our institution must, by its actions, demonstrate to St. Lucians and to the world at large that ours is a democracy where differing opinions are encouraged, where, in the words of the late Sir Dwight Venner, we can, I quote, argue without rancor, end of quote, and where dissenting voices are not treated as prisoners of war. It is my fervent hope that all of us can find it within ourselves to respect this core principle. From my own experience, a budget policy statement is a statement of intent. It is a document that outlines the rationale for the estimates of revenue and expenditure. But perhaps most importantly, it is a roadmap that provides direction, hope, and confidence to all of us as St. Lucians eager to see our country develop, eager to see our people become more prosperous, ambitious, and fulfilled. The first budget of any new administration should be a clear vision for the next 5 years. Can any of us, having listened to the Prime Minister's presentation, truly say that it has inspired any clear vision of our nation's development? The Prime Minister is always quick to tell all who are around him that his party has been given an overwhelming mandate. But as a learned author, William Pollard once wrote, and I quote, "The arrogance of success is to think that what you did yesterday will be sufficient for tomorrow." End of quote. In the last 9 months, our country, our people, have already realized we cannot trust the putting people first mantra. In fact, when you look at the players and the people taking up positions in SLP's government, we all see the inner circle they are putting first. It was always a big lie. Now we are faced with a policy statement that is imbued with those same lies, half-truths, and misinformation. The Prime Minister's budget was lacking in logic and coherence, scattershot in its application, lacking in real leadership and courage to do what is right. In fact, if I had to rate this presentation, I would give it a triple C minus. It was void of clarity, void of confidence, and void of any conviction. We've long realized that Philip J. Pierre, SLP's administration, has no plan for this country. Before I delve into this shell of a policy statement, let us be clear on the narrative. It is a narrative our people must never forget. It will become a benchmark to judge the performance of this country's administration. In 2016, my administration inherited a comatose economy. High levels of unemployment, particularly among our youth. Our economic and social infrastructure needed to be modernized at an unprecedented pace. We said that we would need 3 years to restructure and to reap the rewards of those actions. You never heard us complain. We accepted our circumstances, rolled up our sleeves, and got to the work. 3 years on, in 2019, we did in fact see the benefits of our work. You can examine any measure, any indicator in the Economic and Social Review, and it is clear that 2019 was a watershed year for St. Lucia. Tourism arrivals were at a record level. Revenue was at the highest level. Debt to GDP had been reduced. Our per capita GDP had increased, and the levels of unemployment had been reduced. I challenge anyone to review the facts and dispute what I have just said. Then came COVID-19. St. Lucia and the world at large took a hit. Again, you didn't hear us complain. We rolled up our sleeves and determined that we had to find a way to coexist with this global pandemic. We had to find the balance between lives and livelihoods. We knew that was the only way we could bring this country back onto a path of recovery, modernization, and focus on building a new St. Lucia for all. We went about it systematically, addressing those challenges with a three-pronged attack that was strategically directed at providing an effective public health response, channeling support and associated services to the most vulnerable population, and implementing an economic recovery program that was spearheaded by major capital infrastructure projects. We delivered relief packages, set up a national feeding program, provided income support, assisted in the payment of electricity bills, provided education assistance, and increased the number of persons on the vulnerable persons list to receive government assistance. Our economic recovery program was a range of measures targeted specifically at stimulating the economy. Well, we now see the results of our perseverance. We see the positive outcomes associated with being able to adapt and overcome. The information from the Economic and Social Review is there for all to examine. Government revenues are close to pre-2019 levels. Tax revenues are recovering in a significant way. Growth in the construction sector of 20%. Growth in the tourism sector of almost 67%. Overall GDP growth of 12.2%. And the debt to GDP declined by 2%. While our tourism sector has recovered well, it still has a long way to go to 2019 levels. Overall, arrivals are now just 23% of 2019 levels. Cruise ship arrivals are just 11.8% of where they were in 2019. Stayover arrivals are just 47% of the 2019 level. These figures are not coincidental. Knowing at the time that tourism would not have fully recovered, we pushed construction, and it worked. While tourism has since grown by 66%, as planned, the 20% growth in construction made up for the shortfall. If we make a comparison to Barbados, in 2021, Barbados had 44,000 US arrivals. St. Lucia had 157,000 US arrivals. They had 144,000 overall arrivals. St. Lucia had 199,000. And remember, Barbados normally gets 30% more arrivals than St. Lucia on an annual basis. Barbados' GDP grew by 1.4%. St. Lucia grew by 12.2%. Barbados recovered 80% of its revenue in comparison to 2019, and St. Lucia recovered 98% of its revenue in comparison to 2019. Even more critically, can you imagine how much further down the road to the recovery our government would have been had the SLP not stopped the many capital infrastructure projects that had been initiated by the UWP administration? Imagine. Acts of vindictiveness and petty politics by the SLP continue to stymie our development efforts. Yet this administration has the nerve, the arrogance to try to take credit for these impressive numbers. Let me be very clear to the people of St. Lucia. This current administration cannot lay claim to any successes. These successes are the direct result of the policies of the UWP government, and at no time did this present administration, when in opposition, endorse, give credence to, or actively support our national efforts. On the contrary, we were met with a barrage of negativity. And who can forget? Close the borders, they said. People don't eat roads. If we were in government, we would have tripled the support to the vulnerable. Stop the borrowing. They took advantage of the people's vulnerabilities and insecurities to implant fear and peddle half-truths. They put politics before people. The challenge to the SLP government now is to make use of the platform that has been handed to them. They have seemed to have adopted an approach of badly copying our programs in an attempt to mask their lack of knowledge. The fact is that the copy will never be as good as the original. Take COVID as an example. This government had the benefit of 2 years of experience of best practices, both within St. Lucia and worldwide. The UWP government, in 18 months of COVID management, having to balance opening up of the borders, reopening the economy with no vaccines, recorded, sadly, 88 deaths and 5,000 cases. The SLP came in, changed the name of the command center, changed curfew to confinement, in an effort to copy what we were doing, but still resulted in 400% increase in cases and a 300% increase in deaths. Horrible statistics for our small island, and more evidence that the copy will never be as good as the original. It is clear this is an administration that does not understand our economy. When you pass on cost to our citizens and businesses at a time when the economy is still recovering, what is the expected outcome? When you raise gas prices, who do you think it will affect? Is it not the same people that you claim to put first? The government has a capacity to absorb these rising costs, but have deliberately chosen not to do so. As I mentioned, revenues are back to the 2019 levels. CIP earned $100 million. And on the issue of rising prices, the government keeps reminding us that inflation is not their fault. Unlike when we were in office, we did not have the revenue, but we still gave the support. They have the financial resources available to cushion the impact. Measures such as the reduction in import duties and the subsidizing of basic commodities can and will help. The government can and should deliver on their promised income support of $1,500. Sadly, they chose not to. They're not putting you first. Some of us may recall in last year's debate on the appropriations bill, the current Prime Minister, then leader of the opposition, boldly touted his wish list of interventions designed to ensure that the people and their sufferings come first. He was savage in his criticism of our budget and associated plans. We should never forget the cameo performance of "If I Were Prime Minister," and the repurposing of the $76 million IMF funding. Theater at its best. Well, guess what? You are the Prime Minister, and you have been the Prime Minister for 9 months now. So tell us about your budget. Where is the $5 million to assist vendors and their families? Where is the $3 million for creative industry and media workers? Where is the $10 million grant for the tour operators, dive and pleasure boat operators? Where is the $3 million fuel vouchers for both minibus drivers and fishers? Where is the $3 million beautification program? Where is the $1.5 million for farm labor support? Mr. Prime Minister, we know that you did not repurpose the loans. In fact, you drew down on all of them and boasted that you did not have to incur any new borrowing. So I ask, why haven't you negotiated at least $76 million to cover all the things you said that would ease the pain and the suffering of the people? Has the pain miraculously gone away? The reality is that this is a government caught in a web of lies and deceit of its own making. This is a government that has put up so many flashing mirrors, that has got lost and truly can't find a way out. This is a government of contradictions. On the one hand, we hear the Prime Minister touting various achievements, while on the other hand, we heard the member from Suffer Jack lamenting that the government coffers were empty when you came into office. Both claims are blatantly false. We have to be honest. At this critical time, with the rise of inflation and the impact on the supply chain, that we still don't know what the government plan is. There's no sense of urgency, no coherence or consistency. For example, the decision on HIA. The government is continuing to mislead the people and now want to revert to a proposal that will cost the country hundreds of millions of dollars if they proceed. In the PM's own words, upon completion of the new airport, arrivals are expected to reach 1 million. The estimate cost to build the facility is US $180 million. If we revert to the PPP proposed by the SLP, they would collect US $60 per passenger for 30 years. That's 1.8 billion US dollars for a facility which cost $180 million. Madness. In contrast, our government had already received concessional loan financing from the Taiwanese for the facility. With the OECC, a Taiwanese construction firm, who has a track record of building airports, as the main contractor, overseeing all works, vetting and approving all expenditure, along with a special project unit at the St. Lucia Air and Seaports Authority. We can all see that halting the road projects was a major miscalculation by the SLP administration. All the direct finance and construct contracts we entered into for these projects were the same. They all reported to the permanent secretary in the Ministry of Infrastructure, either through the chief engineer or through the special projects units. But all the projects were under the auspices and the management of Ministry of Infrastructure. And it was the same Minister of Tourism then as it is now, the Minister of Infrastructure then as it is now. It is an outright lie to say there was no plans for road projects or there was no consultation or supervision. It was also a half-truth to state that the Rodney Bay Road was being built at a cost of $15 million for just 1 kilometer. The facts are that the project included 4 lanes, 2 roundabouts, a pedestrian overpass, and street lighting. The breaking of a fixed price contract is going to cost taxpayers millions of dollars, in addition to the inconvenience. All this in the name of revenge. The government continues to be disingenuous and peddle false information on projects. Take, for instance, the street lighting initiative. While in opposition, they complain that we're proceeding with the street lighting program, which included not only lights, but security cameras. Now we learn they're continuing the same PPP using the same formula and the same company after making all kinds of malicious allegations. In the budget, there were more lies about our sporting facilities, which don't deserve repeating. St. Lucia, we remain very proud of the monies we invested under the Taiwan grant programs from 2016 to 2021 in the upgrade of poorly maintained, under-equipped, and inadequate sporting facilities. The SLP should be finishing these all-important projects and move towards creating a youth and sports statutory body, funded from the monies from the lottery, and continue to develop internationally accepted sporting facilities throughout the length and breadth, which include building swimming pools. The after-school sporting programs and building up our sports clubs must continue. We all know when it comes to our young people, we are competing with gangs. And we have to create a more compelling option for our youth. You can't tell them that you are serious about their development if you're not going to make significant investments. When it comes to education, the Prime Minister is taking us backward by not continuing the e-book program and peddling the idea that e-books and laptops are the same. The new e-books include software that allows students to download their textbooks, provide direct internet links, and pre-tape classes to be accessible 24/7 to the students. This program would enable teachers to spend more time interacting with their students and less time on administration. Not to mention the fact that parents would no longer have to spend thousands of dollars on revised books and books every year. Let's look at the issue of healthcare. Since the mid-80s, we've been speaking about universal healthcare, and the Prime Minister tried to revive it once again in his budget, knowing fully well it is not going to work for so many reasons. We've been through all the pros and cons of UHC. Our country is unable to afford it. Introducing national health insurance, like other countries in the world, creates a dedicated revenue stream for the hospital's operations. Health insurance also benefits the more vulnerable in our society in that they now have an insurance card in which they are guaranteed access to health care. We had a solid plan already in motion that would provide coverage of up to $75,000 per year for every citizen, and government would bear the cost of the premiums for the vulnerable. So, is this the intention of the government to do this and simply rename it universal healthcare? There is no clarity. On the issue of St. Jude, I once again call on the government to continue our plans in the interest of the South. The old St. Jude, a bunch of scattered, poorly constructed buildings, had already cost the taxpayers $140 million And according to the 2016 report given to the then Prime Minister Kenny Anthony, it was going to take another $100 million to complete and to operationalize. The new building which we had constructed is one single space that cost $100 million, with a cost of $40 million to operationalize the first floor. The building is 20% bigger than OKEU and is a smart building, the first of its kind in St. Lucia, taking into consideration climate change, energy conservation, and mold prevention. As HIA is tripled in size, new hotels are built, and with a cruise ship berth in the south, it's essential that we have a modern health facility with room to expand. Another lie that we would demolish the old buildings when in fact the plan was to repurpose them to serve as a medical university in support of our hospital. St. Lucia, in the House of Assembly last week, we heard nothing from our tourism and investment minister. These all-important sectors seem not to be the priority for this SLP administration. We shouldn't be surprised, since the Prime Minister admitted very early in his administration that he never understood the impact of tourism on St. Lucia's economy. Imagine, and he was a former Minister of Tourism. He said, "I was a madman, and I was the only leader who believed that tourism could recover." My fellow St. Lucians, my fellow citizens, my concern now is that with the recent changes, changing village tourism to community tourism, alterations to the events company, and their lack of understanding of how the industry works, combined with the current global economic situation, very soon, sadly, the sector will begin to feel the impact of this incompetent and misguided leadership. In terms of tackling the troubling issue of crime, we call on the Prime Minister to continue the plan well documented in the medium-term development strategy. It is a proactive, holistic approach to tackle the core source of crime, while also strengthening and modernizing the police force and our court system. My fellow St. Lucians, I've brought to your attention numerous examples of the lies, half-truths, and distortions of this government. What we're dealing with here is an intellectually dishonest and morally bankrupt government that has the audacity to seek to tarnish the names and reputations of its citizens. The Prime Minister continues to make reference to the issue of corruption and the rule of law and democracy, with talk of a special prosecutor who we assume will be attached to the office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. In the meantime, the Prime Minister, with no proof, calls out members of my administration and ignores the evidence of blatant wrongdoing within his own camp. United Workers' Party has never been afraid of being investigated or being held accountable. This is why in 2017, our government complied with the recommendations of the Ramshaw-Hoy Commission by amending the Crown Proceedings Act to protect the funds of the state by removing the statute of limitations. Now we must all ask ourselves, who will hold the SLP government accountable? The fact is their government was left with a very successful blueprint for the development of the St. Lucia in a medium-term development strategy, a 10-year plan. They were also left with all the resources to address the current crisis. United Workers' Party left a proven track record, but because of petty politics and one-upmanship, the government is tampering with these policies and copying badly, ensuring, as I said earlier, that the copy will never be as good as the original. The recent decisions they have made not to subsidize the cost of gas, allowing the prices to increase, the increases in bus fares, doing nothing about the electricity surcharge, not continuing construction projects, playing politics with HIA and St. Jude, playing politics with investors, are having a disastrous effect. These choices are having a serious knockdown effect to the current state of our economy and to the more vulnerable in our society. While it is clearly in any government's purview to change policy, at least change it for the better. Instead, this heartless administration is raising havoc within households and the businesses. Let's consider a person who is currently earning a salary of $1,200, who is faced with an increase in bus fares of over $100 a month, depending on their route. Their electricity bills have gone from $200 to $420. And now the added expenses of cooking gas, which has doubled in price, plus the rising cost of basic food items. How are they expected to survive with no change in their salaries? If this were a government that truly puts people first and empathizes with people, then how can these policies be justified? My fellow St. Lucians, the day is going to come where all of us, civil society and individuals, are going to have to let our voices be heard. The people of Ukraine are literally dying for their democracy. It reminds us that we need to appreciate and treasure the freedoms and democracy we have and no longer remain silent. The time will come where we'll all have to unite as freedom fighters to remind this government that the People's Parliament will not be silenced. As the quote goes, the time is coming to overrule this administration's pledge to mediocrity and corruption. Our voices need to be heard before it's too late. May God bless you all, and may God continue to bless our island home.